Good morning and welcome back to World Talks here on TVP World. This weekend, Johannesburg hosts a historic moment, the first G20 Leaders Summit ever held on African soil. More than 40 countries and institutions are gathering here, underscoring Africa's rising prominence in global economic and political affairs. Yet the summit comes with an unusual twist. The United States is boycotting the meeting over claims about the treatment of white South Africans, claims that South Africa has firmly rejected. To discuss, I have Michael Bociurkiw, Senior Fellow at the Eurasia Center, Atlantic Council, joining me right now. Good morning, Michael. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Good to be with you.
So why is it significant that the G20 is being hosted in Africa for the first time?
Yeah, as you mentioned, it's the first time, and it's a great recognition of the ascendancy of the African continent, especially countries such as South Africa, which have, I must say, very, very enviable demographics. A lot of the countries on the continent have a huge population of youth between like 18 and 22, and also an astounding amount of entrepreneurialism, natural resources, of course. And I think the thinking now is Africa needs to take matters into its own hands. This is certainly one of the messages emanating out of here when it comes to extraction of natural resources, but especially the processing of them, when it comes to things like transacting between African countries, not using the American dollar. But really a big one here is also debt relief, getting these countries back on track, leadership, and once again, not sending the things that you grow here or mine out of the ground to Brussels or to Zurich, but actually producing it here, creating more income and opportunities. So very, very exciting time. One more thing, of course, is the last time I was here a few years ago was for the BRICS Summit, and now they're hosting the G20. So very proud moment for them.
You've already hinted at it, but let's take a closer look at the agenda. What are some of the key topics that are to be discussed during the summit?
Yeah, well, obviously, climate is a big one. We were at the G20 Social Summit and also the Global Fund Summit yesterday. And a lot of what's being discussed here is climate, opportunities for youth, corruption eradication. But, you know, we've already mentioned you've already mentioned in your report, Ukraine, and it's the elephant in the room. You know, it is a long way away, but earlier in the war in Ukraine, African countries led by South Africa did actually do a kind of peace mission to Ukraine, to Russia, not with many results, but they are interested in solving this conflict as well, because we are in an era where you could have one conflict on the other side of the world, but eventually it will come lapping at your shores. I do have to point out that Russia very much has its feet very deeply here in South Africa in terms of number of diplomats, in terms of sales of weapons and other things. And China is also very interested in, dominating the continent. So one last thing here is a lot of talk about debt trap diplomacy. You know, when you're an African country and you're approached by a China or Russia or anybody else, what do they want in return? And they certainly do not want to happen to them what's happened to other countries like Sri Lanka, where they borrowed so much money from China, for example, and cannot pay it back, and then they take over part of their infrastructure.
Let's go back to Ukraine. I mean, the leaders, as you've mentioned, are supposed to discuss Trump's 28-point peace plan for Ukraine. So what can we expect here, especially because Trump will not be present?
Yes, we attended the press conference yesterday with EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen, and I put to her the very direct question, how is it even possible that Europe allowed itself to be so sidelined in this process, given that it's such an important partner to Ukraine? She didn't really have a clear answer other than saying, well, we're here for Ukraine, we're standing with Ukraine. But you talk to any Ukrainian, I'm based most of the time in Ukraine, and they will tell you enough words. What we need is actions. Everyone realizes that nothing, for example, stops Russian missiles better than Patriot missile systems. Words don't do that. But, you really get the feeling here, and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer will chair a meeting of European leaders here today, I understand. You get the feeling that they've really let the ball fall from their hands on the Ukraine conflict. You will recall the drip, drip, drip feed approach to providing Ukraine with weaponry. It's taken 19 packages of sanctions from Brussels to inflict pain on Russia. Had that type of sanctions packages been done all at once, we wouldn't be where we are today. And then the other thing is Europe is way, way far behind in terms of defense spending because of decades of incompetent decision making. They're working very hard to catch up. But one more thing here, should this peace plan go through, it'll be disaster for Ukraine. But if Mr. Zelensky rejects it, as he should, the big question right now is whether Mr. Trump will go in a fit of rage and withhold intelligence sharing and weapon support. That would be game over for Ukraine.
Right, and Donald Trump is quite unpredictable. But what are the implications of the United States' absence from the summit for the G20 unity, credibility?
Yeah. Well, frankly speaking, there is quite a bit of glee here and, applause for the U.S. decision to boycott. Everyone here knows very well that there are allegations that there's genocide against white South Africans is complete nonsense. We will see a summit without the tantrum diplomacy of Donald Trump and his circle. It will give the stage to other voices in the global South. I mean, I expect Prime Minister Modi of India to really shine here, take the spotlight. We don't have Xi Jinping here. We have his premier. And of course, there's no Vladimir Putin or even Sergei Lavrov. There's a lower level official. So this is also going to be an opportunity for states like South Africa, the host, to really put their views forward. Now, we have to note that the Americans seem to be waffling on whether they're going to come or not because they are assuming the G20 rotating chairmanship after this week. And the South Africans told them, well, in order for that to be handed over to you, you have to physically be here. So let's see what happens. Maybe Marco Rubio or someone like that will show up.
Mm-hmm. There are also voices that perhaps the U.S. ambassador to South Africa could actually attend, which would be quite disappointing, right, for South African leadership especially. So what are the implications of this for U.S.-South Africa relations moving forward?
Well, it's not good. And, I think South Africa is looking very much towards Mr. Lula from Brazil. He arrived yesterday. We saw him. He has taken his own approach to dealing with the erratic Trump White House by standing up for Brazil and saying, OK, you can slap us with tariffs, but we're going to go on our own. And I think India is adopting a similar approach. They're kind of talking to their people about self-resilience, more of an independent economy. I think we're going to be seeing more of that because you really get the sense here that countries are fed up with Mr. Trump blindly swinging his tariff baton to get what he wants. And once again, if America continues to behave this way, it's simply going to push countries more into the embrace of China, of India, and perhaps even Russia. And these realignment of alliances are not easily undone.
Mm-hmm. Right. And what are some of the Chinese and Indian interests in Africa? Can you perhaps zoom in on that?
Oh, well, especially China, access to resources. This is their number one focus right now amid a faltering economy in China. It is really, really scrambling to get new alliances from countries that have more natural resources. And, I'm Canadian. After a chill in Sino-Canada relations for many years, Prime Minister Mark Carney and his team are looking at a reset in relations with China, but also India, because, Canada is a good case study in the sense that our trade flows were traditionally north-south between Canada and the United States. But again, now with Mr. Trump wielding his tariff baton and even threatening to take over Canada, we've realized that we have to very, very quickly realign trade flows from north to south to east to west. And one more thing, these realignments can also benefit Ukraine. How? For example, Canada is also looking at, for example, building new ports on our east coast for liquid natural gas, LNG, to ship to Europe. And in that sense, it would help Europe reduce its dependence on Russian energy, and in turn, that would help starve the Russian war machine of funding.
Mm-hmm. Right, so the G20 is this weekend, but then the follow-up meeting, EU-Africa Union Summit, will take place in Angola on Monday and Tuesday. So what key topics will be discussed there?
Yeah, well, I'm sure conflict will be one of them. There are several raging on the African continent. Migration is very important because everyone realizes that if these countries, many of them source countries for migrants heading for especially English shores, have unstable economies, have little opportunities for young people. And also, if you add on top of that the effects of climate change, these are huge, huge triggers for people to leave. So I'm not sure exactly what they plan to talk about, but if they were to ask me, I think that should be the number one topic, is that how do we quickly create really meaningful economic opportunities for these millions and millions of disconnected, disenchanted, idle youth, keeping them at home and providing them with hope, with opportunities. I suspect with Gaza being in the middle as well, that there'll be talk on that conflict. It's a real tinderbox, as you know, and we have to remember, it was only just a few days ago that a plane load of Gazans came here to South Africa with the help of the Israelis. This is their hybrid warfare technique as well. Yeah.
Without the government knowing, right? I mean, South African government wasn't aware of that happening, right?
Yes, yes.
So what could be some of the...
Yeah, it was a bit of an embarrassment too, because, yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, it was a bit of embarrassment to Mr. Ramaphosa because what does that say about your borders or your lack of intelligence? This was not the first plane, it was the second one. And this is clearly Israel getting back at South Africa for filing a case before the ICC for genocide against Israel. This is Israel in its crafty, malicious ways saying, okay, if you're going to act that way, we're going to send Gazans to you. You're going to have this problem on your doorstep and you deal with them. So South Africa was put in quite an awkward position with that maneuver by Israel. And I think they're going to take steps to probably make sure it doesn't happen again, but let's see.
Mm-hmm. Right, let's see what will be the fallout from this. And before we go, let's go back to South African domestic issues for a moment. So why have some South Africans criticized the expense of hosting the summit? And what does this sort of reveal about the social economic pressures in the country?
Yeah, absolutely. Whether you read the newspaper here or talk to the Uber or Bolt drivers or whatever, they basically are unanimous there. One recurring kind of theme I hear from them is we're afraid that our country will be sold out to these bigger powers. Yes, on the one hand, it brings more attention to South Africa. It brings all the leaders here, a huge contingent of media. And as I said, I was here the last time for the BRICS Summit, and I have seen vast improvements here in Johannesburg, with the number one being is we haven't had one power outage since we've arrived. Before, it was horrendous. So, but these summits are very expensive. They're very disruptive in terms of traffic tie-ups and so on. And a big thing I have to say, are these summits becoming anachronistic? Because a lot of the time we see the final declarations watered down to the point where they're meaningless. So I think that's the other thing leaders have to think of, is don't let this expense, this time go to waste, but have a concluding declaration that really has teeth in it and is meaningful to the common man.
Michael Bociurkiw, thank you so much for joining us. Much appreciated.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching World Talks. Please stay tuned for more here on TVP World.